lie there in that old curiosity shop.
Of course, there are so many recipes for butternut squash soup. It can be boiled, you can roast it, you can cook it in your pressure cooker, you can do it in your, even in your, what is it called, a crock pot. But I like to keep things simple, and so this is the recipe that I've used before and the one that I enjoy, and it really doesn't have too many ingredients. Obviously, a nice, beautiful butternut squash. And then I'm going to be using some carrots, an apple. A Granny Smith apple probably would be better than a Red Delicious, but I've got a few Red Delicious apples I need to use up because I'm going to be getting a truckload full of fresh, in-season South Jersey apples this week. And then I'm going to use chicken stock rather than vegetable stock. If you're a vegan or vegetarian, of course, you can substitute the chicken stock for vegetable stock or water. Some people even put coconut milk in it. And then salt and pepper, let's see, some nutmeg. And I'm not always in the mood to cut up onions and cook onions and garlic. I'm not a big onion and garlic person, so in this case, I'm just going to be using some minced onion that's also got some minced garlic in it, and that'll do just as fine as cutting up a fresh onion, which I really am not in the mood to do today. Okay, so what I have decided to do is I'm going to roast my butternut squash. That relieves me from the hassle of peeling this thing and cubing it, because all I've got to do is cut this thing in half. And if you have ever tried to cut a fall squash, or what's known as a winter squash, winter and fall squashes, you know these are tough birds. These are not easy guys to get through. So dicing these up isn't fun. Yes, you can find them already diced up, and if you've got arthritis or you're not good with a knife, just go and get it already cubed. This is from a local farm market, and it's fresh locally this time of year. So I'm going to cut this in half, and I'm going to roast it. It's going to be so tender, all we have to do is scoop the wonderful squash out of the two halves and be ready to make the soup. Plus, it's something nice about having your stove on when it's a cool afternoon. This is Sunday afternoon. I'm home from church. I'm not going out today. And we got down to 36 degrees yesterday morning. And so it's not cold yet, but there's a little nip in the air. It's warming up into the low 60s, but it's still chilly in the house. And I'm certainly going to enjoy listing in the old curiosity shop while I smell butternut squash roasting in the oven. All right, let's split this guy in half. My cutting board has gone missing. And so I'm just going to do this on the back of a cookie sheet. Sorry for that noise, to protect the counter. Now the way I'm going to cut this squash is, I will just briefly explain to you that because these are difficult to cut, I'm going to make an incision in the center of, I'm going to cut the ends of the squash off first. So let's do that. I know you can't, this is a serrated knife. And it's a pretty sharp one, so it's going to go through there easily. I know you didn't really get to see that, so there's one end off. I will now cut off this end. Okay, isn't that nice? Oh my goodness, this is going to be wonderful. It kind of has almost a cantaloupe smell when it's uncooked. Now that we've done that, I'm going to cut back. I'm going to cut back on this neck part here. I'm going to go in halfway, and I'm going to cut back about 4 to 5 inches. Flip it over. Do the same thing this way. Then I can stand it up and completely cut this in half. All right. And again, I apologize for the angle. I'm not a professional at this. I don't have a film crew. I have never filmed myself cooking anything before. So, what can I say? Alright. Yeah, this is the hard part. The hardest, probably one of the hardest parts is trying to cut this and cut it evenly. Okay, I've got the squash cut open there, and you'll notice that, you know, it doesn't have to be, don't worry if your two halves are not exact. They're going to cook just fine when we grill it. So, not to worry. So there it is. And now I'm going to actually be scooping out the innards. You can save these seeds if you like pumpkin seeds, squash seeds, and roast them. Alright, I'll get that up later. But what I want to do right now is get in here and get out all this stuff. I'm not sure how well... It might be easier for me to just use my hands rather than trying to be fancy about it. I'm also trying to do this so that you can actually see. Just cut it loose. It actually smells very much like a pumpkin. That little piece was a mistake that got chopped off there, but we'll just glue that back on top and you'll never know because we're grilling it. I keep saying grilling. Yeah, we are going to grill it. Okay. Let me get a spoon. And get this out. Scrape all that out. Okay, there's one. And you'll notice I'm using a vintage spoon with a Bakelite handle. A lot of the pots and pans and things I'm using here are from the 30s. My knife, however, is not. So again, I'm going to scoop all this goodness out. I'm not saving the seeds. Just don't really want to be bothered with that today. Okay, come on. If it seems as though I'm struggling, it's really not difficult, but what I'm doing is I'm trying to stay in line with the little camera here, and so I'm twisted in a way that's not necessarily natural for me to work. Because I don't have two cameras. If I had two cameras, I could have a close-up. I could also have a second one filming at the same time, you know, with more of a wide angle. So I guess that's what the fancy people do. I'm not that fancy. All right. Okay. That's out of there. Okay, I'm going to wipe this counter up, and then we're going to get these on the pan and show you how I'm going to grill them. And because I like carrots, I'm going to go ahead and peel these carrots, chop them up roughly, and these are going to go on the same pan and be grilled right alongside of the squash. I think you've all seen people peel carrots before. I don't know that it would be that fascinating to watch me do it, so I'll be right back after these carrots are completely peeled. Now the carrots are an optional addition. I like them, and so, and as a matter of fact, I love roasted carrots. I've got about 4 medium-sized carrots here that have been peeled, and they're just roughly chopped, as you can see. I'm going to roast these right along with the squash. So I've put on a cookie sheet or a shallow baking dish the 2 halves of the butternut squash. Actually, before I put them on there, I'm going to drizzle the pan with a little bit of olive oil. And let it drip all over the place. And this is where I'm actually going to go ahead and add, what I'm going to add to this now is the diced onion, which, yes, is in these little jadeite glass containers made by the Jeanette Company. And this is diced onion, as I said. I'd use a fresh one. I'm just not in the mood for chopping up fresh onions at the moment. So I put some of that on there. And then I'm also going to go ahead and put the squash back on and drizzle this and smear it in so that the olive oil is completely coated. And of course, I did wash my hands after restoring that lamp, so they're nice and clean. You like the way that lamp turned out? I'm thrilled with it. I really am. Okay, that's all coated there. And then, let's see, I'm going to do a little bit of salt and pepper on it, and some ginger. Then roast them. Add the carrots and throw it in the oven for 30 minutes at about 425 degrees. Now, you can put these either way. You can turn them flesh side up or flesh side down. You decide. What is this? This is salt that's coming out right now. Not a whole lot. And here's pepper. In the Black Cat salt and pepper shakers. Okay, so that's all I want to do with that. I'm actually going to turn mine upside down. Flesh side down. Put them in like this. And the carrots are going to go all around. Just like that. Alright, so I've got the carrots on the pan. I'm going to add a little bit more olive oil. I could have put the olive oil on the carrots in the bowl before I stuck them on the pan, but I don't know. If it makes a difference, I'm sure someone will tell me in the comments section below. But I've made this soup. I make it every fall, 2 or 3 times a year. I like to make it in the fall 2 or 3 times, and it's just a wonderful, you get these ingredients fresh, and it's just delicious. Okay, there we go. I think I might also put a little bit, oh, I know, I didn't put the nutmeg on yet. Okay. That's the wrong one. And actually the nutmeg should go on the other side. So let's flip them over. I'm not measuring anything, am I? Nope. I'm never afraid of putting too much of anything in, really, except salt. Because I like all the fall flavors. Cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, ginger, all those fall spices. As far as I'm concerned, you can never have too many of those fall spices. Okay, so there they are. We'll do the apple later. It's going to take an hour at about 425 degrees, so we're going to do 30 minutes in the oven, pull it out, give it a look over, a little stir over, and then I'll probably add the apple and stick it back in for the last 30 minutes. Okay, the oven has preheated. I've got the oven light on at the moment just so you can see what I'm doing. And obviously when I go to take this out, I will not be doing it with one hand. So in you get. Okay, there they are. All right. Happy baking, you guys. And the squash and the carrots have now been roasting for about 30 minutes in a 400. I actually turned the stove down to about 410 degrees. And now that 30 minutes is up, I've diced up the apple. I'm now going to toss this on top of the squash, make sure there's enough olive oil in there. I might even sprinkle a little more of the minced onion garlic powder mix in there as well. And then we'll let this roast for another 30 minutes. Okay, you can see lots of caramelizing on the carrots. The squash is doing very well. I've just added the apples. It smells wonderful. We're going to push this back in and let it go for another 30 minutes. Well, is that a beautiful sight or what? And I wish you could smell this. I really wish you could. It absolutely smells just like fall in here. It smells like the inside of a Bed Bath & Beyond right in the middle of October. Or, I don't know, a Yankee Candle Factory. So everything looks wonderful, everything is caramelized, and you know, I could eat it just like that. Literally, I could just sit down to dinner and eat that. I'm going to let that rest for a minute and cool off just a tiny little bit. Back here on the stove, I have 3 cups of chicken stock, or chicken broth. If you don't want meat-based broth, use vegetable broth or water. So that is just beginning to heat up. And then I'm going to hook the camera back up, turn the squash upside down, and begin to scoop the flesh out. I am not, as I said before, going to try to grind it up inside of my vintage 1930 milkshake blender over there by Hamilton Beach. And I don't have an immersion thing. So I'm actually going to use a modern appliance over here, but it is jadeite green, right? Okay, so I'm going to be putting the squash in the KitchenAid with the other vegetables and grinding it all up there, pureeing it up in there. It won't actually be a puree. I think traditional butternut squash soup is really, really smooth. I'm a chunky guy. Well, I'm not a chunky guy. I weigh 148 pounds. I like my soup chunky. So therefore, I don't mind little bits and pieces in there, so I'm not really going to puree it. But you probably should if you're a diehard and you really want it to be true butternut squash soup. There is some extra stock in case we need it. And here I have a mixture of maple syrup. What is that? That's ginger and nutmeg. It's about 1/2 teaspoon of ginger and 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg. And a teaspoon or a tablespoon, it's a little more of that, of the maple syrup. Okay, and okay, so let me hook this camera up to the little contraption and we'll get to it. Okay, there's one, and you can see I really scraped the dickens out of it to get all of that squash off of it. I don't want to leave any of it behind. I find it works best if you scoop it first because it's still very hot on the inside into the big pot. And then you can scrape the skin after you scoop most of this flesh out. Okay. I don't know if I'm on or off camera. I can't really, I'm trying to do this and I can't really see. Look at that. Doesn't it look just like sweet potato? It really does. right, now that I've scooped most of it out of there, I can go back and kind of scrape at this underside of the skin. Peel, rind, whatever it is. Get all of it off of there. Okay, that's pretty good. I think I've gotten just about everything off that I'm going to get from that skin. So we're going to pull all that off of there, dump it in this pot, and let me get all the scrapings off. Now, because I happen to know that we've got a lot of flavor going on right here, I reserved some of my chicken broth, and just going to pour that in there, and but this is going to add a lot of extra flavor to the soup, because I'm allowing all the goodness that's in the bottom of this pan to get soaked up into the chicken broth. Okay, now, alright, so here is the inside of the squash, and we can see all of the vegetables that grilled, the apples and the carrots are in there as well. And here, wait a minute, where did that butter come from? That wasn't there a minute ago. No, I'm adding 2 tablespoons of butter. Leave it out if you don't want to. This is going to just make it extra rich. In goes the maple syrup and all of those spices as well, the ginger and the clove. When I have 2 free hands, I'm going to scrape the inside of that and get the rest of that out of there. Alright, so that's all in. And we're now going to move to the mixer. I've added a little bit more liquid to this to make it mix easier, which is the reserve half a cup of the chicken stock. And let it go. Now you could, and most folks will use an immersion blender, immersion mixer I guess you call it, or they will use some kind of a pureeing machine. I don't happen to own either one, so I'm doing it this way. Now, as I said before, it's perfectly fine for me that there are chunks in my soup. I like it that way. So there's going to be little bits of carrot, and bits of apple. I would even put some ham in here. The ingredients have all been combined with the rest of the stock, and this has been simmering now for 15 minutes or so. Boy, I wish you could smell it. Now you're looking at it and you're saying, oh, that does not look like any kind of, that doesn't look like the butternut squash soup I'm used to. Well, I like it chunky and hearty. So if you're going to serve this to guests and they're expecting something smooth and pureed, then you might want to smooth it and puree it. But for me, I really like it with the hearty chunks in there. Now, as this simmers, the apples will continue to break down, and so will those few little more bits of carrot. But even still, just like that, boy, won't that be good on a 35-degree morning, which, as I said, we just had yesterday. So I'm going to continue to let this simmer for about, maybe 15 more minutes or so, and then I'm having a bowl of it, or a cup of it. It really smells good, and it's very hearty. I tasted it, and I thought I would add a little bit more salt, and I added a little more of the minced onion and garlic flavor to it as well. For me, the secret to really the good flavor is the caramelized apple and carrot, which, as you saw, I was able to get some of that delicious flavor off of the bottom of the pan. And that really gives a wonderful roasted flavor to the soup. So, there it is. My version of butternut squash, should call it butternut squash hearty soup for the fall season. I hope you'll give it a try.